Okay.
So let me just introduce myself. My name is Macy Sutantio. I am the founder of Autism Career Pathways, a new nonprofit. And today I am co-hosting with my friend Anamaria. And I will refer to you, Anamaria, to start the meeting and introduce yourself and welcome everyone.
Alrighty. Well, yes, welcome. I'm excited to be experiencing my first Zoom meeting with all of you moms. And let's see, so I'm a psychotherapist. I have been for about 25 years at this point. And I have three areas of specialty. The first area would be trauma. That's the work that I started doing early in my career. And I would say about 20 years ago, I transitioned into also working with children on the autism spectrum and also neurodiverse learners, in particular, twice exceptional children and young adults. So those are my areas of commitment, not only passion, but ongoing commitment. So I'm also a mom. I have two children. My oldest is a freshman in college, and my younger one is a freshman in high school. They're both boys. One is twice exceptional, and the other one is gifted. And so I'm looking at today's conversation more as an exchange between parents. And so I'm really interested to hear who you are, who your children are, and maybe any particular questions or issues that you'd like for us to address this morning to ensure that this time is meaningful to you and to the rest of the group.
So, Anamaria, I'm going to let you begin this conversation. Why is it important to nurture sibling relationships?
Okay.
You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about this, and then I'll work in the background to make sure we have good quality recording.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Um, so I think we probably all already have our own ideas about the importance of nurturing a bond between our children. And so I didn't want to spend a lot of time here, but I did want to start there, that recognizing our why might be a good place to look for clues as to how we can go about nurturing that bond. Like, for example, I know for myself, having my two boys, um, each boy has very unique strengths and they're also their individual needs. And so when I think about my whys, one of the reasons why it's important to me that they are able to support each other is because they complement one another. Where one might need support, the other one is stellar. And so by encouraging the two of them to spend time together and having that in mind, I'm able to structure activities or provide opportunities for the two of them where I can capitalize on those on that focus for myself. We also know that siblings are, we don't really get to choose our siblings. We are in, their lifetime relationships. And so really they are stay put permanent peer models. And so they provide a rich opportunity for building a foundational understanding about relationships and also ongoing opportunities for peer modeling or just even if it's not peer modeling, the interaction of how to resolve conflicts or how to set healthy boundaries and so forth. And it also can be, a solid friendship between the siblings if we can find a way of helping the two of them have opportunities where they're able to experience some shared joy and also kind of looking out for each other. Let's see what else we have here. So I think that that's all that I'd like to say, because I know that we are already aware that in supporting our siblings to have a bond and a relationship that works for them is one of our primary goals as parents. I think especially when you have a special needs child, that as they grow older, the person that will know them best is their sibling. And that in many cases, we hope that when we are not available to our children anymore, that they will lean on one another. And so I'd say those are our motivators for continuing to nurture both children as individuals so that they each then will have interest in building a relationship between the two of them.
Yeah. So before we move on to the talking about some parent tools, I have a few keep in minds for myself in terms of how do we, if your home is very stressful and it's been like that for a long time, and maybe even more so nowadays because of COVID-19, I think there are a few don'ts, if you want to call that. One is don't compare. Sometimes we subconsciously compare our kids, right? Because it's so much easier with one than the other, and we take that for granted. We do, right? Because with my daughter, she's so independent, and and she's older, so I expect her to do all these things, and I forget to spotlight that, like appreciate it, maybe not so much in words like, hey, thanks for helping me with the dishes, or thanks, but more so what our neurotypical family member wants is just quality time with us. I think it's more meaningful than all these words we can say to them. Like, so try not to say good job, good doing this, or even thank you. Just be specific. If you're gonna spotlight them and give them feedback, tell them how much you appreciate and love them for stepping up. Also, another don'ts would be to put the pressure on them, the neurotypical sibling, by saying things like, why don't you do this with your brother? Why don't you, can you, like, it's more like putting the pressure, meaning that they would feel like, oh gosh, if I don't do it, that means I'm not a good sister. Or like, I don't feel like doing it, but I have to do it because I'm the neurotypical one. It's not fair for them, I think, at any age, because if they say yes or if they say no, they can't win. You see what I mean? So keep that in mind. So a better way to set this up is to model uh, the model through our communication as parents, how to engage with our neurodiverse family member. uh, we set it up in terms of activities, setting up activities, and we'll talk more about activities later. But instead of asking them, if we set up the activities, and even maybe the parents can start the activities first, and then hopefully your kids will come and join you. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of other don'ts or keep in mind. I think that if you're going to set up like family activities together, is to also, it's not just focusing on your neurodiverse family member. It's not just about that person. It's about the family, and take into account your neurotypical child's timing and availability, especially right now. Your kids feel very stressed out. So that's another challenge, to find a good time. But hey, we're stuck in the house together. So
Mhm.
if there's fine, and focus on quality instead of quantity. So even if it's 15 minutes, it's okay. And it's okay if you don't finish whatever you set up for at the beginning. I think as parents, we have to be flexible. We have to go with the flow also. Uh, okay, so I think that's good to does anyone have any more ideas in terms of keep in mind from their experiences? Anamaria, do you have anything to add to that
Um,
before? Okay.
well, in listening to you, I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the why for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things that some my my, I guess, neurotypical is my older one, my 18-year-old. And he's a very curious boy. And so I realized early on that one of my whys was that I wanted to ensure that my children had a healthy self-awareness and then also social awareness, right? Those were part of our treatment goals. And so I apply those treatment goals to my neurotypical child too.
Mm-hmm.
And part of increasing his self-awareness was looking at the strengths that he had. And then the social awareness was how those assets that he has could be of service to others. And
Mm-hmm.
so so we decided that there was an opportunity to nurture him in that way. And so we integrated him into the therapies. And later on, as a teenager, he decided to volunteer as a peer model with a speech therapist and running a group for teenagers. And now he's interested in a career path as a psychiatrist specializing in neurodiverse learners. And so I think that the why was, the pivotal point for us in thinking, okay, we want him to have self-awareness and social awareness, and we can work to nourish those in neurotypical kids too. It doesn't just happen naturally, right? It's a process of learning. They might have more natural awareness, but the self-awareness really is a piece, and the social awareness are pieces of social learning that can be enhanced in really all people. And so I just wanted to share that piece. As I was listening to you, I was reminded of my own additional whys.
Right. And yeah, so we'll talk more about how important it is to nurture the role of a helper uh, for our neurotypical family member, as well as for our neurodiverse family member.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move on to some hands-on tools.
Sure. Sure. So I wanted to start off by, asking ourselves as parents to notice. So here it says, check your emotions when your children argue, but really doesn't have to be an argument. I guess we could say when there's an unpleasant situation, whether it's, the example that Gloria, you shared, when you're seeking to spend a positive connecting moment with your daughter, and then this start by noticing sort of like a self-check or a thermometer check of ourselves, because when we're thinking about nourishing that relationship between the siblings, they are constantly noticing each other, but most importantly they're noticing us, and they're taking cues from us, as to how we feel about the situation, how we feel about each individual child. And so taking a breath and maybe, stepping away and doing our own thermometer check of where am I right now and what do I need and what am I feeling. And then from there responding. And because not only is it good role modeling, but also it will allow us to step into a place where we can be more intentional with our response. But it also can help us to practice some self-compassion, and maybe adjust our expectations, because sometimes really we're going to be overwhelmed and maybe we need a break. and we need that break before we can respond. And our kids need to take breaks. And so essentially what I'm saying is that in starting with us, it gives us an opportunity to self-care. It gives us an opportunity to be able to um, respond from a place that's more intentional. And in that process, we are increasing our own capacity over time to respond to discomfort and ongoing challenge. And the second big win is that we're modeling that for our children, who may also, whether they're neurotypical or on the spectrum, have some trouble regulating, because we know neurotypical kids can have difficulty also regulating. And regulating is not just trouble like expressing, but a lot of neurotypical children actually internalize their emotions, and it might, come out in other subtle ways. And
Yeah.
so by them seeing our process, they can become more comfortable in having a template of how to express their emotions in a way that's healthy.
Yeah, can I just add to that?
Yeah.
I really agree with what you said. I think a lot of times the neurotypical child internalizes their feelings um, and don't really readily express it. Like after the incident with my son, running out of the house and the police and all that, I know my daughter felt really guilty that because mommy was spending time with me, therefore, this unpleasant situation happened. And like you said, I think we need to pay attention to the neurotypical siblings' feelings too. And often, in the chaos of life, we forgot to do that. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I think it's so important.
Yeah, and I think, when we take the time to, to say like how we're feeling, then we're providing that, we're giving permission for others to verbalize feelings like guilt or shame or anger, the feelings that we may have a harder time expressing or verbalizing. And so, yeah, it's so important to always start with ourselves, and to take care of ourselves. I remember when my children were younger, I felt really fatigued a lot, because like others of you were saying, the hours of therapy and the driving and preparing special meals, I mean, the list goes on and on. And so I remember feeling just very fatigued. And my older son, my neurotypical, is highly verbal and processes by talking. And so sometimes I was just depleted. And so I had to learn to practice some of that self-care and some of that compassion. And as a result, I think now both of my boys are really good about honoring their own needs and requesting that alone time or setting healthier boundaries. And so it started with me learning to set those boundaries, and understanding that they weren't just boundaries, they were necessities, that I also had needs as a parent. So, sometimes that involves getting help from others through respite care, if the other spouse is not or the other parent is not available. But really recognizing that as moms in particular, owning our own emotions really also means, our own emotions about not just the children, but just in general, and making sure that we're practicing some of that self-care.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll move to number 2, practice setting agreements for shared activities. Again, this is, a practice that we can take across different settings. I would say that most children that are in either a therapeutic environment or a school setting have some experience setting agreements, whether it is, for agreements about the classroom or agreements about an activity. They've had some exposure to the concept. And so most children are very easily able to adapt to the idea of setting up agreements for shared activities at home. And I would say that this, again, over the years, I've noticed that this has been a really instrumental practice in helping siblings to find ways of connecting, even if it's for a really short amount of time, in ways that work for both of them. You know, so it could be as simple as they both want access to an electronic gadget, and so they, you know, so you know, it's as parents we can support them in facilitating. You know, so I see what your common, you know, goal or your common interest is, that you both want to use the, let's say the iPad. And so how can you work that out? Can you create some agreements around that? And they might need help depending on the level of functioning for, you know, each child. And so maybe it's getting a whiteboard, you know, like in my office, there's whiteboards in every, like almost on every wall. And then at home, right, most of us have small whiteboards. And so, you know, maybe writing down the agreements, or maybe just a picture of time. But again, really, you know, even if the agreements are really simple and there's some, you know, effort, because, you know, there's some back and forth verbal disagreement going on, essentially you're working on the skill and you're working on the understanding that when people work together, they have different needs, and that you can verbalize those, and that you can talk about them to try and reach an outcome that works for both people. And so I would say that that one is really essential for supporting the healthy relationship between siblings. And then, you know, we always have a different role to serve. Like I said, depending on the functioning, but also the strengths. I would say when I think about my children, my older one is capable of convincing an adult, really, or anyone, to do what he wants. And so I always had to be very cautious in supervising that process and probing my older one to remember what about his brother, and coaching my younger one to be more expressive, and helping him find some awareness of what his needs were, because these didn't come naturally to him.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add for the agreement, setting the agreement. So it's best to do that in a form of a family meeting. So do it as a family if possible. If you have younger kids, use all of the additional visual tools like a visual timer, or a checklist, or just a dry erase board is also good to use, where they can see it. So if they're playing a game on the, or watch TV or whatever, for the neurodiverse kids, it's really helpful for them to be able to have a visual to reference to. And you want to set it up before the argument happens and get everybody to agree on that. At the beginning, after you set it up, I think the parents have to be there to help everyone transition, because otherwise it's just they're not going to be successful at the beginning. And then what they will remember is the feeling of frustration instead of what they have agreed. The
I
system.
really like your point, Macy, about anticipating.
Yeah.
You gotta set this up before the argument
exactly
happens.
When everybody's calm. And I think we have to practice, especially if you have younger kids, you know. And there are little things that are not so small in the long run, such as, you know, if you at dinner time you practice sharing and pass things around instead of like grabbing things, for example, or practicing to knock on the door before and waiting for the person inside to respond before, you know, you actually should go inside the room. It seems simple, but it's not really if you're neurodiverse, because that would require you to really self-regulate as you're approaching a room, to remember, okay, I need to knock on the door first. Maybe there is somebody on the other side. This is, of course, helpful for bathrooms, you know, any kind of bathrooms. And also going back to respecting privacy. If mom or dad are resting or taking a nap, you know, setting boundaries ahead of time, knocking before entering, so that the other person can have a break, you know. But that's also practicing behavioral inhibitions, like stopping what you normally do, just barge into the room. So this is actually a good opportunity for everyone at home to practice that. That's an agreement, right? So a lot of times we don't think that's important, but that is important. So once they agree to these little family rules, how to be respectful, I think that they can generalize to other things as well. Board games, if you play board games, a simple one, that's also practicing rules and engagement, so that could be helpful. Board games come with a set of rules, so if you play a little bit every day, that could be helpful as well. Okay, so go ahead, back to you, Anamaria.
Yeah, so just to piggyback a little bit on what you were saying before moving on. So I think when we think about I thank you for the very specific examples, Macy's. So I think when we think about agreements, there's the overarching agreements around life skills. And I totally agree that setting that up ahead of time is really important. And I would also add that, again, gauging your child's level of functioning and understanding. I find with my clients that taking the time to help each member understand the why of the agreement is really essential, because once they understand and you're able to use some perspective taking tools and social referencing tools, and the tools in our toolbox, they're more likely to be able to honor those agreements. And so it really does need to be a cognitive approach, not only a behavioral one. And so yes, setting up the big umbrella of the agreements, and then I think through practice, then you can bring setting up agreements around individual interactions or activities after that. Alrighty, and so moving on, we also, of course, want to encourage our siblings to nurture each other. And this can be, again, looking back to what are the individual needs of each child and maybe what are their strengths. And then really being on the lookout for opportunities to be able to create reciprocity. So the example that comes to mind is on the afternoons right now that we're homebound, we've been going to a local playground with open grass to play with our older boys. And my older son twisted his ankle. And so yesterday, my husband and I were going to go outside and do gardening. And so we told our younger one, take care of your brother. Can you prepare yourself a sandwich for lunch, and prepare one for your brother? And the younger one was like, okay, like feeling very important. He's gonna take care of his older brother. And so again, that idea that it's not always the older brother taking care of the younger one, that they can take care of each other. And we can find little things that they can do for each other. And in that way, they're nurturing and caretaking of one another. And so really being on the lookout for those opportunities. Because I think for our neurotypical sibling, especially if they are the older one, oftentimes we are asking them to caretake of the younger one or to help out and free us up so that we can become available to the younger one. And so indirectly, they're taking care of the younger one. And so being on the lookout for opportunities to reciprocate so that the other child also feels taken care of. And in our example, the older one was like, I can prepare a sandwich for myself, and we said, yeah, we know you can, but wouldn't it be nice for your brother to do that for you? And so yes, it would be nice. So he, of course, was happy then to accept the offer. Do you want to add anything to that one, Macy?
Yeah, so I'm thinking for more of high level support, neurodiverse family members who cannot yet do all these activities or opportunities independently. Um, I think it's nice to think about what your neurotypical kids like and really work towards that with your neurodiverse family member. So let's say your neurotypical child loves peanut butter and jelly sandwich, for example.
Mhm.
And then so you, the parent, can partner up with your neurodiverse family member to practice making the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It could be anything, but I'm just saying, it could be, I mean, food is an easy one because it's, that's just something to look forward to easily. And in terms of how to choose activities, you don't want to choose activities that your neurodiverse child might like, because that we always do that too much. But you have to flip it so that you want to think about your neurotypical child and what he or she likes to do. And if you have younger kids, of course, you just let them be silly and do uh, play tag or hide and seek. That's just naturally very fun. And if your neurodiverse child is not able yet to participate, you partner up with that child. So then you're not asking your neurotypical child to make the adjustments, but you partner up so that you can scaffold and lead in taking the adjustments, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think for me, because the ability level between the two siblings are so different, it's
Yeah.
hard to find activities
Yeah.
to engage in. And so what I sometimes do is I just tell my little boy, the one on the
Hmm.
spectrum, to give his sister a kiss.
Yeah.
Something as
There you go.
simple as that is
Yes.
rewarding to the sibling.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think it helps to build relationships. So I think it doesn't have to be complicated.
It doesn't.
It's just something as simple as a hug or a kiss means a lot
Yes.
too.
Sure. That's a good
Absolutely.
point, Gloria.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I love the idea of partnering up. And I think, again, depending on the age, depending on the function level of functioning, um, my kids are older, 15 and 18. And so, their abilities at this point are different. But I think what Gloria said is essentially really is about giving and connecting and helping one child be aware of the other.
Hmm.
And so sometimes we're going to need to probe for that and then think about what is the child, the neurodiverse child capable of doing. Maybe it's making a drawing. Maybe it's like it's the sibling is feeling sad, they're missing their friends because of distance learning. And so could you build a Lego, or could you do a drawing, or could you think of a really funny joke? So again, it's giving that awareness of your sibling has this need, and then what are they capable of that they could share. And so
Right.
it's making that connection.
Yeah.
Um, so our next one is spending quality one-on-one time with each sibling. And so again, this one can be tough depending on the age of the children and also their needs. So I'll connect us back to what Macy said earlier, that really it's not about the amount of time. And there's actually been a lot of research done in this area. And the overall consensus is that 20 minutes. If your children can get 20 minutes of quality time with you, or their other parent, that over time, that's you're banking. That's really
Yeah.
important. And so, and I think about quality time doesn't have to be for either child's active time or time where we're talking. That sometimes cuddling, maybe a scratch on the back, or playing with her hair, and really, again, being present, right? That knowing that being together is good, but when you can find you can find in yourself enough space to be able to be fully present with them, that you'll notice that the experience softens, and it can become, and then you might naturally have more awareness of how to nurture that moment. But again, really finding, whether it's creating structure in your day where you're spending time with your neurotypical child, maybe at the end of the day or the morning of the day, or in the morning. Those are two really valuable times, because one is forecasting for the other for the day, and the end is closing the day. And so that could be a reflection time. So can't really emphasize this one enough. This one's really crucial.
Yeah. Well, if you have neurotypical family members who are older, like Gloria and I, well, I have a 15-year-old. One thing you can do to initiate your special time is to do special projects. So my daughter loves to cook, and a project around that theme would be maybe to look for a recipe, and get the ingredients together, and eventually we'll do it together. So the carving out quality time and doing the best is important to make that happen, because when you're doing this special activities with your neurotypical family member, and you have disruptions, and then everyone ends up feeling the stress, what you're going to remember, your episodic memory, is that feeling of frustration, even though it was not all bad. So do your best to really just have that quality time, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But if you think about it as a project, you talk about that special thing you're going to be doing with your neurotypical son or daughter, then they're going to know, oh, it's just my thing with my mom. It could be the cooking, it could be knitting, it could be those kind of things that it's just your thing with your neurotypical child. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I mean, two things. First of all, it doesn't have to be a long chunk of time.
No.
So that makes me feel less guilty, right? So 20 minutes, I think we can find 20 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then it doesn't have to be all just talking with each other. It can be doing a common activity. Because for teenagers, let's face it, they don't always want to talk to their mom.
No, but I have to tell you a funny story. So with my daughter, I ended up learning Korean pop because she's super into it. So I ended up learning about it. I let her choose an album on my iTunes, and in the car I let her play the songs, the Korean songs. It's actually not that bad. I took her to a BTS concert in LA, and so that actually helped a lot, actually, believe it or not. So explore music together. Makeup is the other thing. You have a neurotypical teenager, because makeup, you could just go, order makeup together and go into the bedroom and in the bathroom and put on makeup on each other. It's really fun for teenagers. So
you want to make that time fun.
Yeah. And it's definitely, as a mom, I also learn new things. So it's both ways. We so just maybe take the time to really think about what kind of activities you can use as a vehicle for your quality one-on-one time, right? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of quiet time together. I think that I enjoy quiet time, and I find again that when I lead with also taking care of my needs, that I'm more available. It's like all my energy and my attention is more available. And so I think that's healthy too, that it's not being selfish as a parent.
Right.
And so our next one is getting siblings involved in daily routines. Um, and so, with this one, I think, again, um, even if the in the routine that the siblings are not interacting, we know that routines are very healthy and very useful for helping us to stay regulated and calm,
Yeah.
and that really all of us are better able to learn and perform when we feel that things are predictable to some degree. And so this could be, each child has their own routine, and then having some awareness of what the routine is, for both children, like the children being aware. Um, a current example with the social distancing and learning at home. Um, my older one came home from college, and my younger one, and so when he came back, he had a 2-week spring break, because that's how the university sort of coped, in, to allow them enough time to transition for the next quarter online. And the younger one was in school during that time. And so, making helping each one of them be aware of each other's routine is important. So I make sure I told my older one, the dining room is the school space for my younger one. And so if he wanted to play video games, he could not be in that shared space between these hours, right? And so that goes back to the agreements, but it also goes back to understanding that there's daily routines and each person has their own routine, and being respectful of the routines that they each have. But it also can be maybe within the routine, finding activities that they can share, whether it's, setting the table for dinner or loading the dishwasher, or maybe, one of the siblings is reading to the other at bedtime. So both being aware of each other's routine, because that creates an overall sense of awareness, contextual, with contextual information, so that we can be calmer, but also maybe then points of connection where the two of them can share an activity within the routine. Did you want to add, or should we move on?
No, I think that's good. I think it's important for the neurodiverse family member to know that it's not just about him or her. so
That's hard,
in their
Macy.
mind, it's like, I am the king or the
I'm
queen
the
of the
king.
house. It's
Yeah.
always been there since day one. So this is important, and I think today, because everyone's staying at home, it is an important one to spotlight. It's an opportunity. I would actually, whether you use photos of activities to show, the to-do lists, because a lot of our kids cannot read time yet, but they can follow top to bottom or left to right, like photos of what I'm supposed to be doing in the morning and so on. And it's helpful. My daughter also has her checklists, like basic things to do in the morning and things like that. So if they know everyone has a to-do list, for adults, our to-do list is in our mind, but for our kids at any age, I think it's good to just have this to-do list as the first thing they see when they wake up in the morning. So you can set one up in your child's room, and when he or she opens his eyes, that's what they reference. And they also know that brother or sister also has their own to-do list, because that way they can, it's a good way to monitor other people living together in the house, right? Yeah.
So I was just reminded in listening to you, Macy, that when we had Sage Visit, so my husband and I opened a school for neurodiverse learners a few years back, and I remember and during that time becoming so aware of the amount of time that teachers spend at the beginning of the year,
Right.
um, orienting their students to the learning space. And so I think that that's an idea that we can borrow now as parents, now that we're creating learning spaces in our home more intentionally, having that mindset that we need to orient our children to these new routines and also use of space. In a way that, you know, a teacher would orient their students at the beginning of the year to their classrooms. And so it might mean like walking through the space and understanding how the space is going to be used, and then understanding scheduling and so forth, right? But really thinking about a teacher orienting their student at the beginning of the year into, you know, to their classroom. And so in that same way, we're creating you know, those opportunities for our kids. And that's a lot of what's involved with developing the executive functioning piece of being able to scan space and understanding how to navigate space. Alrighty, so let's move on to the next one, cheer each other on. And again, I think this one's pretty straightforward, and it can be, you know, with little things, you know, or like, or it could be something bigger, right? Like one of the siblings has had a big accomplishment, and so maybe you're going to have, you know, a special dinner, and everyone's going to have a small role to play with that. Or maybe is, you know, someone did really well on a test, or what have you, or they finished building, you know, that massive Lego, you know, spacecraft. So it, you know, it could be a variety of things, but really encouraging and maybe creating a family practice of celebrating one another. It can be really a useful way of putting the spotlight on different family members. And by putting that spotlight on different family members, we're celebrating and cheering each other on, and also creating that internal understanding that each one of us has things to be celebrated.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay, so and then giving everyone space. Again, this one can be, you know, can vary for different families in different situations. And so I would say that, you know, again, we want to think of space doesn't have to be like square, like a lot of square footage. That really is the idea of one space as giving someone a break. We have different levels of tolerance for interaction, for noise, for activity. And so sometimes giving someone space is, you know, when someone declines a game, for example, giving them the space to do that, that it's okay. Like maybe they've reached their threshold and they really need to just have some time alone. And so it can be, you know, that type of emotional and honoring their needs space, but also I think physical space. And you know, I'm thinking of like younger children, you know, in my office, I have like little corners where they can retrieve to, and or I also have a water fountain, and I notice a lot of the kids when they get maybe there's a difficult emotion coming up, or they need a break, they go to the water fountain and they just play with the water. And so it could be, you know, a space like a sensory regulating corner or space where they can go to. And if they're lucky, it can be, you know, their room, or, you know, some like defined physical space where they can go and be on their own. And then
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Sorry, Anamaria.
yeah.
It is 9 o'clock. I have to
Oh,
get going. I'm so sorry, but
okay.
before I sign off, I just want to say I appreciate you, Macy and Anamaria.
You're
You've
most
shared a
welcome.
lot of really helpful tips today.
Yeah.
And,
well,
really
I'm recording, so I'm going
Okay.
to edit the recording. So for all the moms here, I know in some places it's also midnight already.
Oh.
So just email me. I'll give you the YouTube links later. So
Okay,
after,
sounds good.
I'll just here, just real quick, because if you have to go just email. If you have any questions, you can email Anamaria or email me. If you email me and if you need the recording and the PowerPoint, I can easily email it to you.
That's great. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Bye, everyone. Nice
Bye.
to
Happy
see you.
Easter.
Bye. You too.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. So we're almost there. Oh, almost there.
Yeah.
Almost finished. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so, luckily for us, the last one, teaching them to appreciate differences, is one that we've already touched on. But again, the idea of differences being something that can be neutral, right? Like when we think of differences, sometimes we think of like deficits. But what I mean with differences here is that literally we are all a very unique constellation of a variety of traits and talents and passions and interests. And so finding and creating opportunities for our children to become aware of who their sibling is, and then maybe what their similarities are, and then maybe what are the areas where they have some differences, and then finding a way of highlighting the benefits of those differences. So if we have one that is very shy and doesn't like talking, and the other one is like super high, verbal and can't stop talking, there's there are going to be times when both of them are going to benefit from each other. Like the quiet one might benefit from having the older one take the lead and then slowly warm up into the conversation or the situation. And so again, really helping build some self-awareness, and then awareness of others, so that they're better able to appreciate the benefits of those differences.
Yeah, that's right. Well, also sometimes, a lot of times, they don't see the similarities, right?
Yeah.
Especially if there are a lot of resentment involved already. They just feel like, whoa, we have nothing in common and so on, So that's what I found actually with the music. Once my daughter and I were able to bond and appreciate and enjoy, she could actually use music as a common thing with her brother. So sometimes we have to get into it with our neurotypical family member in order for them to be able to share that interest with the neurodiverse. So everything goes back to us as parents to think outside of the box and initiate that, and actually to build pleasant loving feeling about the activities itself, having a positive episodic memory in order for that person to be able to share with other family members. So that's another keep in mind. So Anamaria, can we go to this slide and then
Sure,
we
go
can
ahead.
so I just put together this simple family activity ideas that you guys can maybe use. Reading is a great one. We used to have bedtime reading time, but this is something maybe your neurotypical child can take the lead if he or she's a good reader to read with or read for the younger sibling or the neurodiverse sibling, or it could be vice versa. Reading can also be looking at photos, your collection of old travel photos, which a lot of people are doing that because they can't go anywhere. So go back to your photos and organize it and do it as a family, or do it as a one-on-one quality time activity, organizing your pictures. That will be awesome. To do that, it could be looking at cookbooks. It could be looking at places you want to travel to. So when I say reading, it doesn't have to be books. It's just looking at something together. So taking care of pets, if you have pets, would be a good one that you can designate roles. Like I hold the bag, you hold the bowl, something like that, or maybe going out for walks with your pet. Baking, cooking activities, that's always a great activities, because someday we want all of our young adults to be able to take care of themselves, and being comfortable in the kitchen is great. games, whether it's board games, and now they have all these apps that we can introduce our kids. We actually play Scrabble using Zoom, and we just use a tripod. We play it with our cousins in another state. So you could do that. Taking walks is great because you can take all kinds of walks. You can do bird watching walks. You can do, take your flashlight and take a walk with your flashlight. You can do different kinds of themes when you take a walk. And it's a fun one to do with as a family or one-on-one. Obstacle course, if you have a good sized backyard, you can set it up in the backyard, and it's a good one to practice, taking turns and moving, changing up the obstacle course. It's a good one, especially if you have like little kids. For teens and young adults, cooking, baking, science project, organizing your garage is a good one where you just take pictures of what things you want to sell, what things you want to keep, and you could do it throughout like weeks. For example, listening to music, board games, video games. I'm not much of a video game, but it's actually a great bonding activity with the neurotypical family members. So I recommend that you share their passion as well. Planning a travel destination, watching a show together, that's another one. And I think that's it. Well, I'm going to stop here. Thank you, everyone, for spending your Easter morning and Easter late night with us. So we will do another topic in the future. So, Anamaria, thank you so much for your time. Thank you,
You're
moms.
welcome. Have a
Thank
good
you.
Yeah.
day.
Thank you
Bye.
so
Bye.
much.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Have a
Bye.
good day.